So Marques Brownlee just reviewed the EVANNEX Neo, a humanoid robot that's supposed to live in your house, fold your laundry, wash your dishes, water your plants, the whole futuristic package. But here's the thing, as Marques pointed out, almost everything in that demo was teleoperated. A human in another room wearing a headset and controllers was driving it. That's not autonomy at present, that's remote control. Marques calls this out as a massive gap between the promise and the product, and he's right about that part. But what really got my attention was the comparison he made to Tesla's full self-driving program. Because Tesla did something close to unique in product history, they got millions of customers to pay for the privilege of training their AI. And now companies like EVANNEX, Figure, Apptronik, Chinese robotics companies, and yes, even Tesla's own Optimus are staring at that same challenge. They need oceans of real-world data before they can deliver the dream of Rosie the robot in your home and factory. So the question is, can these companies pull a Tesla? Can humanoid robotics companies convince people to buy a beta product that mostly exists to make the next version smarter? Marques thinks this is unlikely. I'm not so sure. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. Before we start, a quick shout out to my channel sponsor, Joa. They make the best accessories for your Tesla and other EVs and have amazing warranties and customer service too. They're really great folks all around. I personally love their fan-cooled phone charger for my Cybertruck, which keeps my phone cool while charging, and it's fully accessible. And of course, they have tons more cool products you can choose from. Oh, and they make perfect gifts for your EV-loving friends too, so be sure to check them out. Link is in the description. And one other bit of breaking news that came out at 1 o'clock this morning, Elon just finished a long AI5 design review with Tesla California and Texas chip engineers. It's going to be great. And AI6 and AI7 will follow in fast succession. AI8 will be out of this world. And then he replied to himself, chip design review continues tomorrow, followed by Optimus demo review. So I wanted to call this out real quick because number one, I thought that AI5 was already taped out. I thought they were doing prototype manufacturing of AI5 already, but it appears they're still doing design reviews of it, so really interesting. And of course, the other data here, AI6 and AI7 following in fast succession, means they're unlikely to be completely new architecture. They're probably going to be generational iterations of AI5. But it's possible AI6 and 7 will be out before 2030, which is a pretty remarkable feat, considering it'll be late 2026, maybe 2027, before AI5 itself is out. And then AI8, who knows when that will come out, but it sounds really fascinating. It sounds like they might be targeting artificial general intelligence on the edge or something along those lines. All right, so with all of that out of the way, let's take a listen to a chunk of Marques's review. This has got, I believe, 4.5 million views. Yep, 4.5 million views on it already. And of course, it's an excellent review of the EVANNEX Neo, so I highly recommend it. I will leave a link to that in the description. Also, you can check out my review of the EVANNEX Neo as well. If you're interested, I'll leave a link to that in the description and at the end of this video as well. But the part that interests me starts at about 7 minutes in, so I'm going to play a little clip of that. We'll listen to what Marques says, and then I will give you my thoughts, of course.
Really, there's two main reasons. And believe it or not, I think Tesla self-driving is a really perfect parallel example for a lot of this stuff. See, basically, in order for this robot to be everything people want it to be, they need to develop a super smart AI system that looks through the robot's sensors and is able to learn its environment and recognize everything it's looking at and teach itself to navigate that environment and perform tasks. It has to learn what a laundry room is and what the laundry looks like and how to fold each type of clothing, and it needs to learn what cups and forks and glasses are and how to pick them up. And it has to be adaptable to all these different sizes and shapes and materials and things of all these household objects, so that when the user asks for it to do something, just like, hey, Neo, vacuum the living room when I'm gone, or something like that, then Neo can go, okay, I know where the living room is, I know where the vacuum is, I know how to use the vacuum, where the handle's at, like how much battery life I have, how much I need to vacuum the whole living room. I know not to knock over lamps or certain objects in there. And even the laundry folding thing, like just that requires a ton of training data, or at least some way to understand all these different shapes of shirts and jackets and hoods and vests and all sorts of things and hooks and hangers and what gets folded, what gets dry cleaned, all these different things. And the list just goes on and on. And like, what if one of the tasks is going and getting the right medication for an elderly person and bringing it to them? That it has to get that right. Like, it needs to identify the correct medication at the right time and the right intervals and bringing it to them. Like, that That is one of a ton of household objects that it has to specifically get really good at. Now, in the self-driving car world, no matter what you think of them, Tesla's definitely a leader here, and they've had a pretty clever approach to trying to work on this problem. Because their problem is their robots on wheels need to learn all of these possible variations and ways to navigate situations that could happen on the road and how to get around them. Traffic cones, construction zones, weird lane markings, etc., etc. So, with their millions of cars already on the road, they have slowly, very slowly, let people turn on this beta self-driving feature in small stages in their cars, while instructing people to keep their hands on the wheel, of course, so that they can slowly start to gather information from people willing to beta test. And so those cars will encounter and navigate all sorts of situations for the first time, and then the second time, and then the fifth time, and then the 100th time. And all of this data can go back into the system to help all these cars learn and get better. And now at this point, this is like their primary advantage, is they have millions and millions of miles of training data from people essentially beta testing for Tesla. It's a robotics challenge. It's an AI challenge. But yeah, they're essentially using early adopters to beta test to make the systems better for the eventual masses.
So Marquez very eloquently recaps exactly why Tesla has such a huge advantage in full self-driving now, which is starting about a decade ago in 2015 or so, they began installing sensors in all of their cars and collecting data. And even more interestingly, they began selling full self-driving beta to us customers back then when it was, frankly, pretty much crap. And there were a number of people that purchased full self-driving and utilized full self-driving, and more people have done that over time. And then, of course, Tesla introduced their hardware 3 and then their AI 4 chips into the vehicles. The vehicles became smarter, and people continued to test the vehicles using full self-driving, of course. But perhaps more importantly, even if they didn't choose to purchase full self-driving, they were still driving the cars, and Tesla's sensors were still collecting data. So Tesla was collecting a ton of data off of these vehicles over time. And as I said in the cold open, I think this may be fairly unique in history, that Tesla has been able to collect data from their users to this extent, and also get a certain subsection of users to even pay for the privilege of using a very much beta. You would consider it maybe an alpha product back in the early days. So things have gotten amazing. Now, version 14 of full self-driving with AI 4 is remarkable. It is really, really good. If you haven't seen my first drive with that, check it out up here. I'll leave it at the end of the video as well. But it's taken Tesla a decade to get to this point, and in the meantime, they had a car that actually functions, right? You can use it without full self-driving. You just drive it like a regular car, which means that it's got a lot of value on its own. The question becomes, can you pull that same trick with humanoid robots that really don't have a whole lot of value unless they are autonomous? You can't get inside a humanoid robot and drive it around and make it useful for yourself. It's got to actually do things on its own in order to be useful. So while 95% of buyers didn't even pay for full self-driving, it still sent back a ton of sensor data, and it was just good enough autonomy for a certain subset of people to purchase and utilize full self-driving and help Tesla to create that data flywheel that they are still relying on to build out an amazing autonomous software suite. So here's the deal. Tesla built a functional platform first, then they layered AI on top of it. But humanoid bots have to reverse that process, and that's the interesting question. So first, let's talk about some similarities. Both humanoid robots and Tesla's full self-driving depend on environmental learning, right? They need reinforcement learning feedback, and they need tons of edge cases. They have to capture not just the regular stuff, but all of the edge cases. Number two, they both require the equivalent of teleoperation. In the case of cars, that would be us human beings driving the car, which is effectively supervising full self-driving. And then, of course, as full self-driving came online, we could supervise it explicitly and watch it do it and then take over when we needed to. And of course, in the case of humanoid robots, it's very literally teleoperation, where a person would wear, like, the Apple Vision Pro and some controllers and stuff, or a bodysuit or something, and teleoperate the robot to make it move around, because of course, as an equivalent human being, you can actually do that inside of a humanoid robot where you can't do that inside of a car. And of course, there are stakes to both of these. Tesla, if it makes an error in full self-driving, can crash, it can harm people, it could even kill people, and of course, it could damage property. Bot errors are a little less critical, but you could have broken glass or something if it drops a glass, or more critically, if, as Marquez says, a humanoid robot goes to pick up somebody's medicine, picks up the wrong medicine, and gives that wrong medicine to a person who doesn't check that, that could be a critical mix-up that could cause significant harm. And then finally, as we've been talking about, both of these autonomous projects need massive amounts of data to close the gap between where they are currently, or at least where Tesla's full self-driving was, say, 4 or 5 years ago, and where it needs to go to be able to be completely autonomous. And so that now takes us to the differences, or in other words, homes are not highways. So first of all, driving is a constrained 2D space, right? You've got a grid of things. You're basically flat on this grid. Yes, you can go up and down hills, but you can lay it out flat, right? That's why you can drive around on a map or something. Your goal, as Dr. Scott Walter has said many, many times, is not to interact with the environment. You want to basically avoid everything. So that makes the task relatively more simple. You've also got relatively simple output controls. You just have a steering wheel, a brake pedal, and an accelerator. Homes, on the other hand, are unstructured 3D chaos. There's stuff everywhere. There's stuff up high. There's stuff down low. It's a chaotic situation, and everybody's home is a little bit different. Of course, there's a massive difference in the speed of operation of these robots. A car driving 75 miles an hour on the highway has very little time, very little room for error for making mistakes. Whereas a humanoid robot can literally pause. It can go like, oh, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do exactly right now. And under most circumstances in the home or even in the factory, that's not going to cause a huge problem. It can think about things if it needs to. So that's another big difference, and that is advantage to humanoid robots over full self-driving. Another big difference is a privacy barrier. In other words, cameras in living rooms are not quite the same thing as dash cams on roads. So grabbing images around your car of you driving through space, that's one thing. It'll be a very different thing to have cameras in your Neo robot looking around and actually pulling in data and sending that to the home base, to 1X or Figure or Tesla or whatever. That is going to require a certain degree of trust between the consumer and the company that is selling these robots. And it may be a term and condition in the beginning, like when we get our 1X Neos, which I have pre-ordered, by the way. It may be a requirement of early adopters to allow these companies to ingest data, hopefully in some sort of a semi-randomized sort of way. Now, of course, people have cameras all over their homes these days, and privacy doesn't seem to be a thing anymore. So maybe people won't care about that, but that is a definite difference. Being on the road in public and ingesting the data from external cameras and IMUs and stuff like that from a Tesla is a very different thing from getting data from inside your home. Another big difference is that Tesla has sold the value of the car from the time being, right? Even back in 2015, 2016, 2017, when full self-driving was more of a vision than a reality, you still had the actual value of the Tesla that you could drive around. It's still a very valuable car. Humanoid robots, on the other hand, are selling potential at this point. They will probably have just good enough functions when they are released, like opening up doors, picking up cans, things like that, that they can say they can actually do something. But in order to bootstrap their learning process, they're going to have to pull in a lot more data and be teleoperated and have a lot of interaction. And to his credit, Bernd Bornisch in the release video said specifically that it's going to be bumpy. It's not going to be a smooth ride. Expect to be an early adopter. Expect to have it not work perfectly all the time. All of that kind of stuff is very important. And another really critical difference between Tesla's full self-driving journey and now is the quality of artificial intelligence and the quality of synthetic data. Synthetic data can now cut real-world needs 70 to 80% using Isaac Sim or using other reinforcement learning techniques. In other words, you don't need nearly as much real-world data as you used to. And of course, the neural networks today are leaps and bounds, orders of magnitude better than what was available 7 or 8 years ago. So that makes a huge difference now. And then finally, we have the hidden sort of bridge between what we're talking about here, between full self-driving on highways and consumer humanoid robots in your home. And that shortcut is factories. And while Marquez doesn't talk about that in his review, it's a very, very important bridge between the fully structured driving environment and the fully unstructured home environment. So unlike homes, factories, of course, are very structured. They're laid out to be very, very clear what you do, to be very, very safe, to have, I mean, they even literally have lines and things like that to tell you where to walk. They have stations where you work. All of that is extremely structured. Factories are structured, repeatable, sensor dense. They have lots and lots of feedback going on, which means that they are ideal for early training loops. Now, obviously, 1X is going straight for the home. That's been their goal all the time, but other robotics companies like Figure, for example, with their BMW partnership, have been working in factories for a while. And of course, Optimus is going to work in the factory because Tesla creates cars, right? They have factories all over the place that they could put these robots into, and more than likely they are already working in those environments. We've seen some indication of that as well. And then, of course, we've seen other companies like Aptronic with their NASA and DoD contracts. So you've got these sort of halfway houses, I guess, between a very structured outside world of full self-driving and the very unstructured inside world, three-dimensional world of the home. And the other thing that these factories bring is they create millions of nearly identical interactions every day. Industrial use cases are built on repeatability, which means that you get the data over and over and over again. So in the early days, while you're training not the edge cases, but the sort of middle of the bell curve, that is really, really important. And of course, that factory data is the equivalent of Tesla's early fleet miles, where they were just training on the middle part of that bell curve of data. They weren't training on the edge cases yet. They needed to train on the middle part to get the car driving in the everyday sort of environment that we just sort of take for granted nowadays. And of course, data from these factory robots, grasping, locomotion, object recognition and stuff transfers directly to the home and of course generates a lot of potential simulation data as well. So the real bootstrapping here might not come from you buying a Neo, it might come from factories that are quietly generating the training data first. And of course, once those lessons bleed into the consumer versions, then the flywheel can really start to turn. And now I'm going to turn back to Marques as he talks about beta buyers, the early adopters, the people who are willing to pay to train these robots, and whether there will be enough of them to make this flywheel work.
I think the point here is you don't get to make this awesome, perfect home robot without all of this information. And so they need the training data. And so they go right back to early adopters. So people who press that order now button first and who actually, I guess, get one of these when they start to ship them, will get a robot that can probably do a few simple things autonomously, like opening doors, but there will be many things it can't do. And for that, if you scroll down on their website, you can see there's expert mode, which is when you have something the robot can't yet do, and you schedule one of their teleoperating employees to look through the sensors into your home and do the task so that the robot can learn from it. And this is something that they've pretty directly said that they expect early adopters to be totally cool with. Like, go watch Joanna's video. I'll link it below the like button. She basically grills the CEO about all this stuff, and he's kind of just like, yeah, you know, if you want to be on the bleeding edge of this, like, you know, it will probably blur faces and maybe let you geo-fence certain areas of your house. But yeah, that'll be one of the things that they allow you to do. So look, there are certain industries where pre-ordering something that's not finished yet is actually normal behavior. Like, this happens all the time with smartphones now. This happens in video games. It even happens a bit with cars these days, although sometimes that can even go too far. But now with all these AI products coming out now, it's resulted so many more times in this strategy. They feel like they have to announce the product way before it's done. And they end up putting out this thing that is just nowhere near the dream. And that's how you get, you know, we talked about the Humane pin. Doesn't that sound familiar? Like, getting announced with such a high potential ceiling and promising that this could maybe be a post-smartphone world type of gadget. But it was just absolutely not good when it came out. And not enough people were willing to beta test something with that miserable of an experience. And then the Rabbit R1, like I said, that's another one. And, you know, they are surviving and they're improving, but absolutely with those early adopters. But a $20,000, 5'6" humanoid that wanders around your house and does chores, like, are there really that many people, you think, that are willing to spend that amount of money and know that they're going to have to potentially give up some pretty serious privacy and are basically going to be a beta tester for some unknown number of years to hopefully maybe someday achieve that dream? Some of those people are out there, but is there enough of those people?
So this is really the big question, the key question here. How many people are willing to be early adopters? And obviously we've seen that S curve, and the early adopters are, you know, it's a very, very small number of people relative to the overall population. But with reinforcement learning and synthetic data and everything, I think that we don't need as many people as Marques might be thinking that we need. And I personally believe there will be enough people who will be willing to pay to be part of that mission. And more importantly, when you combine that with bots that are working in the factory collecting data that way, that is enough, I think. Now, will it be enough for EVANNEX because they're going only into the home? That is a really interesting question. And it's something they may have some insight into already because, of course, they've started the pre-orders. Do they they have 1,000 of these pre-orders, 10,000, 100,000, a million. They probably won't tell us the answer to this question, but that will tell them a lot because, of course, let's say that they only get 10% of those people who've put down the $200 deposit actually go ahead and purchase that thing. But if you have a million of them already and 1X says they're only going to produce 1,000 of these robots next year, even 10% would be 10 times more robots than 1X can produce next year. And then, of course, as the next generations of the robot come out, people will find it to be more and more useful because it will learn new things. And so then you'll get a bootstrapping sort of effect. But of course, many other companies are going into the factory first, though interestingly, Figure has said that they want to go into the home now as well. And Brett Adcock, a lot of the stuff that they've been showing recently has been in the home, folding laundry, that kind of a thing. Part of that is probably just to garner excitement around this, but I think also part of it is that they realize that they need this. They need this data because the data is so much more diverse. The data is so much more chaotic. It's so much more interesting in terms of edge cases and things like that, that I think these companies realize they need to go into the home as soon as possible. So the question is, does the early adopter math work out? ARK Invest recently said that they expect 10 to 50,000 units per year to be able to be sold into the market in the early phase. While these humanoid robots are not as useful as they will be eventually, that seems like an adequate number at this point because there's going to be significant manufacturing constraints for quite a while to build that number of units across the industry at this point. As I said, 1X aims to create 1,000 units in 2026. Figure and Apptronik are already doing enterprise pilots, but in relatively small numbers, and they're both looking at producing on the order of 1,000 units each. And Tesla itself has kind of rewound the clock a little bit, and they're only expecting to produce a couple thousand of their Optimus version 3 robots in 2026. So everybody's looking, all told, we're probably looking at way less than 10,000 humanoid robots created in 2026. And in my mind, that means there's going to be a significantly larger demand for these robots between factories and homes and early adopters than these companies will be able to create. And that is a good situation for these companies. That means that I think they will be able to start this flywheel going. Will they have enough data with only 1,000 or so units each? I don't know, but it is a start. And as another data point, China's UBTech has already sold 5,000 Walker S units, which means that there is a demand in the marketplace. That is not a particularly high cost robot, but it still shows that there is an early adopter demand. So that gets us to the just good enough paradox. I don't think that bots need to fold laundry perfectly the first time. They just need to look like they will learn how to do that. They need to look like they're promising. They're good enough right now, and they show the promise of getting better. You add on top of that Elon Musk's playbook of support the mission. In other words, telling people, hey, you can help us to support the mission. And again, you could see that in 1X's launch. They're like, help us do this. It's not going to be perfect, but you can help the mission. And I think you add that to it, you get a psychology of people going like, yeah, we're on this autonomy team. We want to help out. And so then you have that basic good enough autonomy, you add in teleoperation, you add in synthetic data, and the data flywheel really ignites. It really starts to take off. So let's project out the outlook a little bit. Let's say that there's 10,000 humanoid robots that are shipped. I think it won't quite be that much in 2026. Those robots, if they're properly utilized, can produce millions of hours of data that can come into these companies. And of course, you can then use that to bootstrap synthetic data based on this real data to create scenarios that are similar to the ones that you're seeing the robots have problems with right now. And then you can do reinforcement training at high speed on large data clusters and not depend on these individual robots to do that. And then, of course, update the robots in the homes and in the factories and stuff to take advantage of this training. So with that, I'll go out on a limb and say by 2027, maybe late 2027, humanoid robots will hit about 2020, 2021 levels of Tesla's full self-driving competence. Not great, but good enough to do a lot of tasks. And then, of course, after that, things really start to take off because the flywheel really starts to engage. So Marquez, of course, is right. The gap is real. The data gap is real. But unlike a decade ago, unlike 2015, 2016, we now have proof that systems like this can work. Tesla's full self-driving is the obvious biggest, but you've also got things like ChatGPT and stuff that show that these neural networks can be incredibly smart. So you've got much smarter AI systems, both in terms of hardware and the software, the neural networks that operate these things. You've also got incredible synthetic data now that didn't exist a decade ago. You've got really good capabilities capabilities in terms of teleoperation that works much better than it did a decade ago. And of course, there are a lot of believers out there, including me and a lot of other people that I know, who are willing to pay to train the future. They're willing to go like, I will put my money into something that's less than perfect because I want to participate in creating this autonomous future. So I personally believe that the data gap isn't as big a problem as Marquez thinks, and that supply and not demand for humanoid robots is going to be the bottleneck for years to come. And by the time supply constraints start to disappear, these companies will be past the chicken and egg usefulness problem, and things will really take off. So data gap or no data gap, the humanoid robots are coming, and they're going to be doing useful work in our homes in no time. Alrighty, folks, that's what I've got for you today. Let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with Marquez? Do you think there's another path? Let me know in the comments. While you're down there, if you don't mind liking the video, it really helps things out. And of course, if you want to see more of this kind of content, please consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.